Welcome to the Grow Bridge. I'm your host, Ivo-Castillo, here in Miami. This podcast is for entrepreneurs and leaders with strong ties to Latin America who wants to understand how Anglo founders think about growth, marketing, leadership, and decision making, and how to apply their mindset in your own business. Today, I'm excited to have Monica Ortiz. She is the founder of Farrago Events. Hi, Monica. How are you?
Hi, Ivo. Nice to see you again.
Yes.
So,
Well, excited to have you, and let's begin.
sounds good.
Please, can you share a bit about your background?
Sure. Oddly enough, I have a journalism degree, so I'm a writer by trade. But when I started working, it was recession. So I ended up doing a marketing job, but in events, and started event planning for small companies, for staffing agencies, and that turned out to be something I was really good at. You know, I like standing in front of people and chatting and meeting all kinds of people. That's a lot of what you have to do. And I also liked that I got to work with every department in a company. I got to work with the engineers. I got to work with the PR people. I got to work with the executive team. I got to work with clients and partners, and putting together a really diverse group that sort of built a brand for the public to see and to visit for 3 or 4 days in a big week. So the whole event planning model became something that I thrived in. And as my career progressed and I worked for a lot of corporate companies, I decided to strike out on my own after the COVID pandemic and started. I've been consulting off and on for about 20 years, but I started Farrago Events in 2021. And unlike a lot of other event agencies, I wanted to specialize in helping startups go to events for the first time and in trade shows. So a lot of big companies will help you put on user conferences and sales kickoffs, and we certainly do all of those things, but 80 to 90% of a company's event calendar will be attending trade shows. And what does it mean to be successful at trade shows? Trade shows are not as expensive as a user conference, but they're still probably one of the most expensive things that any company will handle. And how do you make sure that you're meeting prospects, meeting clients? How do you tie it back to sales? How do you tie it back to media opportunities? How do you tie it back to marketing, messaging, and selling a product? So that's where my company thrives, is we help you tie all those things together. And we named the company Farrago. Farrago actually means a hodgepodge, right? It means a confused mixture. So our offering to our clients is that we make sense of that. We will take all of these disparate things and we'll package it together into a single platform and a single look and feel in a trade show so that you are presenting your best face to your prospects, partners, and customers. And that's kind of what we do.
That is great.
And we deliberately stay small. We're a 3-person organization, 4 if you count my best friend who helps me do the books. And it's we stay small because we work as part of your team. We often take the place of an entire events department within a startup organization. And I've had one client that's been with me for 4 years. They've never built their own department. So others have transitioned into hiring full-time event people. And at that point, they've got process, they've got budgets, they understand how this works. The team is excited to go to events because they know what to expect. So we help build that muscle within a company so that it becomes something that they know how to do on their own eventually.
So, to understand a little bit more, I'm a little bit deep on this. Who buys your services and who uses day to day?
Day to day, it would be a company that is usually within the first 5 to 7 years of existence. They may or may not be public. Most of the time, they are not. I do work with companies that are large and they're already public and they've got shareholders and that type of thing. The dynamics is very different internally. But our specialty is to really help companies that are introducing themselves to the market. So, for example, some of the industries I work in are HR, are in finance, are in software. Those have been like the most that I'm delving into the dental and medical fields right now. What's interesting is it doesn't matter what kind of industry you're working in. The process of planning an event is pretty similar. It's similar. You have to decide what your message is. You have to decide who the best people are to be there. What does your brand look like? What is important to attract the right people to talk to you, and what's the next steps afterwards. Event planning is kind of I wouldn't want to say a formula, because you want to have your own unique voice in every industry and every company, but there are certain foundational pieces that are the same regardless of industry.
And to give some context, do you work in a specific location or do you handle?
So I usually sit here at home in my home office, and my entire team is remote. I have a team member who's in Florida and I'm here in California, so someone's always awake during business hours and handling the client needs. We do events across the US. I've also done events in Europe and Asia. As long as you have a strong partner on the other side, I think you're good. That's the one thing that came out of the pandemic, is that people got very used to working remotely and communicating effectively that way. Event planning has always been, you have to work across time zones, depending on where you were. But I probably would say 98% of what I do is US based.
Yes.
Yeah.
And no, but this is important because the people sometimes and the brands think about the presence, right? Like
Right.
they don't see these kind of events can be organized with a local person.
Correct.
And what you're offering is great, because you're offering I think it's a strategy. You offer the know-how or what to do regardless of where you are.
Right. And often I act as a bridge to a vendor who's local. So I like to give business to local entities. So if we're going to go to Barcelona and we're going to host clients, we're going to take them to a local restaurant. We're going to take them, sightseeing tours. We're going to do things that are enrichment, and we're also going to make sure that their presence adheres to local customs as well. There are things that are considered polite in every society. So understanding that and making sure your team is prepped. A lot of companies that do international events, for example, have a local team. So that team is the one that's showing up in the booth. We may be planning the structure from the US and working with local vendors, but the team is local as well. And that is your best bet for success, because no one knows that community better than someone who lives in it.
And what shift do you see in B2B events for this year? There are these trade shows, field events, or own experience, digital experience. What is it?
What's important, I think everyone got a little tired of the virtual events, after 2.5 years of it. So there's been a rush back to go in person, but it's not coming you don't have to come back and have the giant presence. What you really need to think about, and this is what I counsel my because I work with small companies and startups, is budgets are tight. So decide where your return on investment really is going to be. I'm not going to sit there and tell you have to have a giant booth. In fact, if you're going to events for the first time and you have a giant booth, it's probably the mistake to do that. You're spending way too much for not enough return. Have a dinner. Partner with another company so that both your brands are featured and you invite mutual customers, mutual prospects. There are things that you can do outside of the booth that are a lot more meaningful, a lot more intimate, and allow you to have conversations. Because in the end, I think people still buy from other people, and they buy from people they trust. So that sense of being open, being genuine, that's still going to be the best thing you can train your on-site team to do and to be is know the product, understand what the need is, and listen. A lot of times you have people who go, let me tell you what this cool thing is that I built. That's
Yes.
not the right first question. The right first question is, what are you looking for? What do you need? And then respond to that, right? Work your product and your solution into that. Because if you're starting with, let me sell you something, everybody goes, whoa.
Yeah.
That's when they start walking around, they put their hand on their badge and they're like, you can't see my name, you can't scan my badge.
Yeah.
I don't want you to send me 10 emails after this event.
Yeah,
Right.
no, or start to looking just for the pens, no? With the pens with the brand
Exactly.
and take it like, yeah, yeah, give me the back, no?
I have 3 children. Can I have 12 pens? They'll set them up for the school year, and you can just kind of go, okay. But that's not the right conversation. If it's the first question, that's fine. I do also tell my teams that sometimes it's the dumb questions that start the conversation. Like, hey, how you doing? Did you try that tiramisu? It was awful. What did you think? You know what I mean? Conference food is not always going to be your favorite thing.
Yes,
So
correct.
it's a good way to start. Just start the conversation by, like a human being. What would you say at a party? If you were meeting a stranger for the first time. It's not different. It's not different just because you want to end up in a business conversation.
That's great. And that brings me to this question. How are teams, in your perspective, how are teams changing mixed between in-person to virtual and hybrid?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think we've gotten, and maybe this is a generational thing as well, business has changed to be so much more like short form content. You know what I mean? It's Slack messages instead of email. It was email instead of phone calls. It was phone calls instead of in person. So it's gotten more and more aloof, I think, as you go. And then it becomes a really big learning curve to leapfrog from I just sent a bunch of Slack messages to now I'm standing at a booth at a show that has 10,000 people and they're all standing in front of me. What do I do? So I think there's a lot of layers that we put virtually between ourselves and the person we're trying to talk to. And it feels safe and it feels controlled. And a trade show sort of strips all that away from you because you're standing in front of someone. Is your shirt buttoned correctly? Are you smiling at people? Are they smiling back at you? Who's around you? And it becomes almost an anxiety point for some folks. You can tell who the introverts and who the extroverts are. The extroverts thrive in a trade show. Absolutely thrive in it. There's a lot of stimulation, there's a lot of stuff going on. The more introverted you are, the harder I think it is to kind of make that leap. But it's also a muscle, right? It's something that you can also learn about yourself. I'm good for 4 hours at the booth, not 8. And you work with your team to make sure that they have what they need to be at their best. You tell them what to expect. You make sure they have the messaging. You make sure that if there's a difficult question, if someone comes up and is combative, how do you handle that? If a competitor comes up and is combative, that happens. It's rare, but it does happen. How do you work that? Who do you pass it on to? If I'm standing at the booth with the team, I'm the one who gets the hard questions because I don't care. I know how to handle them. But I'm sort of the safety net. There is always one person in that team who's going to be the safety net. Identify who that is, early on, so that you don't have to carry the world on your shoulders. You are a team for a reason. But I
Yeah,
think
and
that's the biggest change is that I think it's harder to kind of go from Slack or email only to being on site and have it's a different way of interacting and it's a lot more personal.
correct.
We've lost some of the personal.
And sometimes you get like, I don't know if this is a this I think that I have noticed that. I don't know if you agree with me or not, but the platform or the team members doesn't behave the same in the same platforms. You can tell when somebody is good digitally speaking through Zoom and when they have to be in a stage,
Yes.
they are complete different animal.
Yes.
You know what I
Yes,
mean?
that's
So
true.
Of course, there's people who have communication skills. They perform well through all the platforms.
Right.
But there are people who doesn't have those skills, but instead sometimes very good in person and sometimes they're bad in digital, right?
Yeah, I've had speakers who rehearsed online with me and then got on stage, looked up, saw 250 eyes looking at him, sets of eyes. Did a 1 hour presentation in 10 minutes without looking up and then ran off stage. And I was sitting there going, what am I going to do for the next 50 minutes? I don't dance that well. So it's like, what do I do? And we ended up having to put one of the company executives up who just took a whiteboard and started whiteboarding and talking about the solution and was fantastic. So it is something that you do have to rehearse. You know, the comfort in a different media is something that can be taught. And some people will just sort of naturally say, I'm good digitally, I don't want to be on stage. They'll sort of learn. It's also good for, and this is going to be controversial, it's good for people to fail. You know, sometimes you've got to let people experience something to know where the boundaries are. It's not great when it's in public and everything with an event is in public, but it does happen. And it's not about how good the person is, how nice they are to their family or how good they are to their job. It's really just a comfort zone of where is your platform. Some people are great at all of them, but the ones who are great at all of them, also you'll find they've got years of experience. They've honed it, you know, they've practiced it. And that helps you understand what their level is. Someone who hasn't done an in-person, you really need to, I think, for me as a professional, the responsible thing for me to do, for someone who cares about my clients and their people, is I will make sure that I am with them the entire way. I will be with them when they're prepping. I will take them to the stage, make sure they look at the size of the room, you know, stand on the stage, work through the slides. I'll give them as much prep as possible. I'll give them tips like take a deep breath between sentences. When you see the period, we'll make the period red. Take a breath, you know? And those are little cues, you know, and I've had one speaker come up to me and said, I love the red dot. I love the red dot. The red dot that makes me go, and then, you know, and all of a sudden he's not dizzy on stage because he hasn't breathed for 5 minutes. So it's you have to work with people where they are, you know, and be straight with them. You know, honesty is always the best. If say, look, if this is really making you nervous, this is right. So
Now, moving to as an entrepreneur, as a business perspective, what is working well now for you and what is frustrating in terms of growth?
yeah, in terms of growth, you know, I've been very lucky in my career that, you know, I've been in events for a very long time, and events are natural networking. So, you know, your LinkedIn is, you know, you've got a lot of folks on LinkedIn that you can reach out to. You've got a lot of resources from different groups that you can reach out to. 100% of my business has been referral based. So I've never had to pitch. It's someone was working with me at a different company. They moved to a new position. They needed an event person. They gave me a call. And I've been very lucky that that's how, you know, business has continued. So I went from no clients to, I think at the peak I had 5, which was a lot, you know, at one time for you know, group that I'm trying to keep kind of small and intimate and personal. It kind of leads me to what's been difficult is the scale. So you never, when your business is referral based, you never want to say no. But saying no also means adding staff in order to accommodate. Adding staff means adding levels. More people to manage, more people to train. One of the things I'm very proud of is in my entire career, I've worked with a lot of men and women who wanted to learn how to do events, and some have really enjoyed it and gone on to be, you know, several of the people I was working with 20 years ago. They're directors of events now in companies that they've joined. You know, they've moved into, and there's some people who are just like, oh, this is really not for me. But I've mentored a lot of men and women in the business, but it's still time that you have to invest in people. So as a sole business owner, how do you juggle that time? Where you're training people and you've got people who report to you and you've got to make sure they're okay and that the clients that they're serving are okay, and then still have my own set of deliverables, my own set of clients, my own set of projects. So, I feel like in the next couple of years, I'm going to hit that tipping point of, am I handling client projects or am I just running the business? Because I'm hitting that tipping point where I may not be able to do both, or it will be an exception rather than the rule. And I think I would miss that. I would miss that interaction, like becoming an account manager rather than the event planner. I think I would. So that's, I think, a challenge. And when you're a business owner,
This is a strategic decision, right?
it's about, a lot of it is about balancing ambition and life and work. You know what I mean? Like,
The
do you
balance,
want the
right?
work balance? Right. Right. What do you envision your daily existence to be? Because when you're a business owner, you're not working 9 to 5. You're always on the clock. You're always thinking about the P&L report you have to produce. There's quarterly taxes. You have to make sure everybody got paid. You have to make sure those invoices are in. Did the invoices come in so you can pay out? These are things that are constant. But I think when you start your business, have a vision of what ideal looks like. Ideal might look like you have 20 people and you're running the company, and that's what the ideal, and you plan that way. The 5-year, 10-year plan, you plan that way. If you want to stay small, you have to identify the points where I'm going to give this up. I'm not going to say yes to everything because I want to stay within a certain group. And stick to that. Become a referral point if you can't take on the business. But either way, you really have to be clear about what the company you build looks like. You really have to be clear about what the life is you want to lead. What does the job give to you rather than what you need to sacrifice for the job?
Yes, 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 yes. That
Do
is
you want to have a family? A lot of event people, myself, I never married, never had kids. I traveled and I did all that other stuff, and I did that with my eyes open.
you,
But
you
if you
choose that.
want to get married, have kids, be around every holiday. I had an event that, the setup was always the Friday after Thanksgiving. So I would go have lunch with my family and then get on an airplane. I did that for 10 years. I mean,
My
these are sacrifices you have to make
Yes,
with your career, right?
yes, yes, definitely. The next question will be, which metrics matters the most to your clients and the end of your services?
I think the best metric for me is not one that's quantifiable. It's not a number. It's when they're willing to put their reputation and their credibility to recommend you,
Yeah.
to talk about you. To me, that's the best metric. I've been lucky enough to have clients who change companies and take me with them. I've been lucky to have clients who mention me when they do podcasts. I've had clients who, when we're standing at a trade show, grab my hand and drag me to another booth and say, you need to work with this person, And I didn't know it was happening. And that is, to me, the best metrics, because that's trust, People will not, they should not sacrifice their credibility and everything that they've worked hard to establish for themselves professionally to recommend. And I think this is what people forget when you do referrals and when you send a resume in and, like, here's all the people who can refer me. Those people are putting their professional credibility on the line to help you. And we should never forget what that actually means. That is the highest compliment you can be paid.
And this for know your clients, what proof they ask first? Case results, cost ranges, time to value, or what do they ask for when they want to hire your services?
I think my answer is different than others because I usually have an existing relationship with the people that are hiring me because it's all referral based. A lot of my conversations go straight to, what do you need, and here's where I think we can help you, and sort of completely answering the need. The couple of times that it's been a cold kind of sale where the person didn't know my work and I had to kind of pitch the sales pitch. It's really been about what have you already done? And I have a portfolio. I can show you photos on site of events that we've done. Like, here it is. Here I am standing at the show. You know, here's the booth. Here's the team. That's the thing about events is if you didn't take a picture, then what are you doing, right? It's also about not talking about things like, do you need a TV? My conversations start higher up. When I'm talking to a client about new business, a prospect or a potential client, I ask them, what is your goal? What does success look like? Because if success looks like I want to get the brand out there versus I need to make $10,000 in sales, that's two different strategies. And I discuss that. And I actually make clear and I help them figure out what that is. If they go both, then I'm like, okay, you got to throw some money at this. You got to do speaking sessions and you have to do a big booth. If you want to do both brand and messaging, you've got to have a bigger team. You've got to have a bigger budget. You've got to make a bigger splash. If you're only going for brand, then it's all the booth. If you're going only for content, then it's dinners, webinars. You really have to have that level of conversation, and that's where the trust comes in. Because I'm not going to sit here and tell you, what color carpet do you want? Do you need a TV in your booth? That's the stuff that's easy. You decide that later. Have the goal first. Plan against the goal. Counsel against the goal. And I think that's where being in this business for 30 years, I'm aging myself, but you learn that if you don't have that part worked out, if you don't have the big goals worked out, everything below it crumbles and it starts to not fit together because you're making decisions based on individual pieces of things instead of saying the whole needs to look cohesive. It's like Lego blocks, right?
And in this process, where do you think these programs, let's call it that, or events or service, stall in the first 30 days? It is for approvals, if the content, are the vendors? What is do you think that the thing gets complicated?
Where it gets difficult, yeah. There's actually several roadblocks and they're all in the beginning. The first is budget. Events are expensive. If you've never done them before, it's sticker shock. And you can't go to an event and have them say it's $15,000 and you go back with, what do I get for $1,000? You can't do that. You're literally buying off the shelf, right? So budget is something that needs to be very deeply researched and considered. And I will take a step back, where before you even get to budget, you have to be looking at a number of events based on who you want to talk to. Understand the audience, because if you spend $15,000 on an event, which is often a lot of money for a startup, right? But one sale, one good sale, 30,000, you've already doubled your ROI with one sale. So that's the kind of math you have to figure out, but it only works if you select a show that has prospects in it. So do your research. Find out not just how much the show is, when it is, do you have the right staff? Is the audience that's attending the right titles? Are they decision makers? There's a theory of, are you selling to the attendee or are you selling through the attendee? Which means you have to educate the attendee so that they can go back and educate their boss. Way harder sell, longer sales cycle, right? So that's a different conversation. That's a different way of delivering the message. That's arming someone to take your message, hopefully correctly, back to their boss, right? You're not having the conversation direct with the boss at that point. So these are decisions you have to make before you even get to budget. If you decide this is the right audience, you need to decide what the right level of presence is. If it's a show you're attending for the first time, maybe send a couple of salespeople to attend and walk around. Are they meeting the right people in the hallways? Are they chatting with people at sessions? They may come back and say these are not the right people. I didn't exchange a single business card. Or everybody's the right person and you need a meeting room, you need a booth, you need a dinner, you need a partner, all your partners are there, all your competitors are there. So these are things that you can figure out and set the budget against. How big of a splash do you need to make? After that becomes contracts. So make sure you read all the contracts. Is it, you can't do certain raffles. You can't bring certain people, or you can't, there's things that you can and cannot do. And then what is your legal process internally? I have clients that don't have a legal department that sort of say, did you read it? And I always read contracts carefully. I will highlight anything and I will negotiate for them. Anything that feels uncomfortable, it's rare. But I also have a client that has a contract signing process that has 18 different steps in it. If I want to do a show in March, I should have sent that contract in January or December.
Yeah. Yes.
It's a very long process. So those are the biggest hurdles, is budgeting accordingly, making sure you're in terms of how you sign that contract. The third would be staffing with the right people. Who's attached to this? How much training do they need? So those are the three things you need to sort of work through. They're the most difficult.
Yes, and that brings me this question. You follow them. You guide them through this entire process. Did you ever come with hey, I want this event, and after you asking, hey, what is the purpose? What is the goal? What is the target and everything? What is your budget? You say, this is not an event that suits you, and they still want to do it, and they still...
Yeah. I mean,
Yes.
in the end, I provide a service.
Yes.
I don't think there are necessarily any bad events.
Yeah.
But companies will do events for many different reasons. We have events that don't have ROI because they were put by a customer, and you're supporting the customer and you want to have a presence in their base, so you go. They're done by a partner and you are meeting other partners. There's many reasons to do an event that don't necessarily tie to ROI. As long as you understand that from the beginning, no list is going to be uploaded. It's X number of dollars it comes from, a partner fund. And those types of things. That's, you got to also be aware of which line item is paying for this budget.
Correct.
So who's the budget owner for this event, and what do they want, and what do they need to measure?
Yes, you're giving great examples. What is bringing me this question? If there is a bottleneck in your business that slows your wins. This refer with the question I did before. What is it and why?
Time is the biggest bottleneck. When you have a busy, like right now, I think I have 3 clients. And winter has never been this busy in years previously. I've never done so many events. And even with my team, and my team works very hard and I work very hard, we're probably doing 2 or 3 events a week. We're just, so, I could probably work 24 hours a day and still have plenty to do the next day. This is part of where you start thinking about scale, and you start thinking about your business, and is this a tipping point? And it kind of goes back to those basic decisions of what kind of company do I want to run? What kind of business and what kind of life do I want to live? Right? But with events, you're always behind the deadline. There's always a deadline.
And that makes me curious. Is there any way, for example, because you're talking about, hey, my time is limited because it's human hours. It's not
Right.
machine that runs it, right? You have certain top that you can produce and do and be awake, for example,
Right.
to say. And this part of this scaling process. Scaling is to how do you want it to get bigger, hiring people to manage things, or reduce or be more productive in the technology. And this make me to think, is there any part of your process, creating, managing a strategy or delivering or even do delegating that can be solved or make you more easy to run it?
Yes, because there is a template for planning events. Things have to happen in a certain order.
Yes.
Right? So any event manager who works with me learns my process very quickly. And I've documented all of that. You start with the research, you end up with the contracts, you go through the payment cycle, you set the budget, you create, the plans, build the team. Like, it follows a pecking order, right? That is a repeatable process. It doesn't matter what industry, it doesn't matter what event, it's a repeatable process. You just take out the pieces that don't apply to that event. So that can be automated. It's also good to understand what pieces you actually own. You can advise on messaging, you can contribute to messaging, but most of the time you want the messaging to come from the client. They know their product, they know their business, they know their audience. You're taking what they generate and you're absorbing it and then displaying it, putting it on a sign, putting it, printing it in brochures. So building the support network as together with the process, so you don't have to question where you go when you hit that part of the process, of the planning process, that you know exactly who you need to talk to. Is this on an Asana board that you have to build a request? Are there SLAs? Are there timelines to develop design graphics? So you're going to have a booth, you're going to need 12 panels. What do those 12 panels look like? Well, they have a creative director. So you put it on his radar as soon as you can and say, this is when I need to go to print. And you build in the review cycles in that. A lot of it is just having that template and that timeline will keep you sane. Like, always try and have a plan from the very beginning. How long does it take? And then I had a friend who early in my career told me, when you build a project timeline, you double the amount of time it takes, and then you add 10% to that, and that's actually how long it's going to take, for you to actually get a project done. Because what people will calculate against is, how long did it take me to design that panel? They don't calculate, well, how many times did it have to go back and forth, and how many people had to say yes to that design, to the content, how many said, oh, that's not what it means, and it needs to say this, and what about this? And that conversation is where the double plus 10% happens. The approval process.
That's a great question. Sorry. That's a great answer.
Been living it. So
yeah. Yes. So in order to that, where do you want to see your business in 6 to 12 months? I think it's a lot of personal aspect I like about it is the different touch from, and my audience know from the past interviews. I really want to know your vision about your business in the next 6 to 12 months.
I like where we are. I've got clients that have been there with me for years, and there's a lot of trust. We're friendly, you know what I mean? It's a very comfortable space. I think it is time, the mentorship has always sort of happened on the side. And one of the things I'd like to expand into over the next year, maybe 18 months, we stretch it a little further, is I want to get more into mentoring as well, having interns and, people who aren't sure if they like events, they won't know until they do it. Come and spend 3 months with me. I'll make you work. There's plenty to go around. And also training. I've developed a way of planning events that is comfortable, that is scalable, and I'd like to start kind of putting that out there, developing training systems and platforms that help event managers. Just kind of, a good event manager is going to also know, and I try to make sure I maintain this, is that you can forget things that you've known, right? So just because you've been doing this for 30 years doesn't mean you're not going to forget that critical piece of it until sometimes someone younger, when you're training them, or when they're working for you, or, they're in a project and they're checking in with you, they will bring up, what about this? And you go, oh gosh, yes, that's important to know. And it's a good reminder that, just because you've got all this experience and all this training, there's always something new to learn. There's always something to remember. There's always something you've forgotten. We're all human. And I think I want to delve into that side a little bit more in the next 12 to 18 months.
In all this 30 years of career, building your business, working with clients for so long, I want to ask you, what did you have tried that did not work? And what did you learn from it?
I was actually a full-time director of global events when I learned this lesson. We had a team of 6. We were doing 300 events a year, small to big, a lot, right? And a lot of them were small, but the big ones were like 2 weeks on site, 30 by 30 booths, very big. And then we had someone transition out of the management team who handled field marketing. And I was asked to step in and take over that team. There were 12 people on that team. And I realized probably within 3 months that I was not the right person to lead that team. I didn't have the bandwidth to juggle both, right? It would have meant that I became a manager and didn't have individual responsibilities for events. 15 people, 18 people was too many for me to manage. I could not juggle that many people. And so I ended up going to my boss and saying, I'm failing everybody and myself. I'm stressed out all the time. Someone always needs something. I don't always have the right answer. I'm struggling. And I was told, this is career limiting. To give this back is career limiting. And it was, but it was either that or, end up being unhappy and quitting myself. And we ended up filling that director position and the team moved under somebody else. And that was the right thing for the company. I don't know if I would count that as a failure, but it was very much eye-opening. That's when I learned about scale on a personal level, that I had to admit there was something that I could not do. I could not juggle all of this. I was not the right manager for that team. They were starting to think about quitting because they didn't have enough support. They didn't have enough attention. So it was humbling. It was humbling to say, yeah, there are limits.
Yeah,
You can be ambitious. The spirit is willing, but the flesh was weak. I could not juggle all of that.
And you know what? That a great leader do that. A great leader can lead everybody. A great leader knows where and who to lead, and is honest with himself.
I think you're 100% right. Like, there are so many lessons out there, especially on the internet, which has an opinion about everything, that says you need to be ambitious. You need to keep grabbing. Give me, give me, give me, give me, give me. But the question really is, does that give you the life that makes you happy? Because if you're not happy, why are you doing it? Why are you doing any of it? If you don't wake up and say, I have things that I can achieve today, and if you don't go to bed feeling like I got stuff done, what's the point?
Yeah, if you never satisfied, I don't know how you wake up like feeling, hey, I'm doing some progress.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm completely agree with you. This nonsense of that you heard about, hey, keep pushing, eat, be a shark, and like eat everybody, and don't take be a soldier, and don't take anything behind, kill everybody.
Yeah.
Until you're dead.
More does not mean better. More is just more.
Yes.
Decide what's better, not decide what's more. That's a lot of philosophy on one cup of coffee. So.
No, but it's great. This is great. If you could fix one thing on your business, what it would be?
Me. I learned the lesson about more versus better because I am ambitious. I always want to do the next thing. And I have had to remind myself, not just learn it, because learning is a constant thing. Like, every time I'm faced with the decision to take on something new, to provide something new, to work at midnight because I got asked a question even though I'm not billing for those hours, or that's not part of the job description that I've agreed on. Like, is that really necessary? Like, I've had to take a breath to say, are you doing this because, this is going down a different path. When you are a Latina woman, a woman of color, and you're a woman of color at a, more senior, let's say, in age, the bar for what you need to prove is pretty high. So you sort of grow up in the business with the need to prove that you're just as good as anybody else. Mm-hmm. And I think that can drive ambition, because some of it is, I have to say yes because otherwise they'll say no to everything else. Like, it feels like it's all or nothing. If I don't stretch and stretch and stretch and stretch, then I will lose opportunity. The truth is that's not true. You can set boundaries and limits and say, listen, I can advise you on this, but I can't take it on. You need to learn to have those conversations. They don't need to be conflict ridden. They just need to be honest, and they need to be businesslike. It's not about your self-worth, and it's not about how good you are. Do you love your kids? Do you love your parents? Do you take care of everybody? It's not about those things, but I think that's something that's part of the experience of being a woman of color who's also an entrepreneur. There is that bar, that invisible bar, and that invisible ceiling that you always feel is right there. And it's something to pay attention to, because it's an instinct to react, to solve the problem, to fix, to be the solution, to be the go-to person. And it's not necessarily your role to do that. And being okay with it not being your role.
Yes. And in terms of operations, day-to-day basis, what is you will change?
In terms of operations, I'm happy to say we're sort of clicking along. I'm not very spontaneous. My friends will tell you I'm not very spontaneous. I have a calendar. I have a calendar. I have deadlines. I know when my meetings are. I try and do them ahead of time if things are repeatable. If I need to meet with my team, I set up a weekly call. I'd rather cancel a call because we don't need it than have to find time on the calendar for everybody to get together. That's sort of the way I operate. And that's true of everyone I need to talk to. Every 2 weeks I do an accounting call. Every 2 weeks I do a mentorship call. Every week I do a call with each of the people who are planning events for clients, and we go through everything. We're constantly on Slack. But these are things that I put on the calendar. My calendar has all my personal appointments, it has birthdays, it has client meetings, it has everything. Because if I don't write it down, I don't remember it. It has links to where I need to go to sign up for stuff. It has everything. So, and I think that's important. Would I like to be more spontaneous? Sure. But as long as I'm an employer, I'm a business owner, I'm a person who wants to have hobbies and free time and do my own projects, this is what works for me. It doesn't work for everybody, but this is what works for me. So operationally, I have to pay attention to that. I have to make sure that things don't bump. If I want to have a full, rich life, and I'm lucky that I do, and I still want to see my parents,
Yeah,
you got to make time for it.
Be precise.
Yeah. Unfortunately, if you call me and say, let's go have coffee, I'm not going to be able to make it most of the time. But if you say, let's have coffee next week, I can put it on the calendar.
Yeah, correct. Just our final question would be, what is your mindset as entrepreneur? What gives you your drive?
I think my answer 5 years ago would be different from what it is today. When I first started the company, my drive would have been, I want to be the go-to person. I want to be, the phone's ringing off the hook and everybody wants my services because they think I'm wonderful. 5 years ago when I started the company, and then that was probably good for the time, right? Because I had nobody calling me at that point. Now it's really, I want to be someone that my clients come to when they're trying to figure something out and they say, hey, I have this issue. What do you think? That's who I want to be to friends, to clients, to family, is someone that they trust to just say, I'm going to make the decision, but your opinion means something, whether it's professional or personal. I think for me, that's my driver right now. I want to be someone that you can trust to have an off-the-books conversation, and then that adds value. It's really about adding value. Does anyone need an event agency? There's a lot of people you can hire to do this. The added value is that I'm your trusted partner. You can trust me to ask a question that isn't in scope.
Yes.
And still get valuable feedback. And the longer I've had a relationship with the company, the more valuable the feedback, because I know the players. I know who they're trying to go. It's like when you have a problem at work, the only other people you can tell about it are your coworkers because they know. You go home and you tell your husband or your wife and they're just like, I don't understand what the problem was. But your coworkers are like, yes.
Yes.
It's that sort of, being a part of the organization, I think, is what is the goal. I don't want to be seen as separate. I want to be someone that's embedded.
That's a great question. Okay? That's a great answer. Monica, thank you so much.
This was a lot of fun.
Yes, it's a lot
You
of
asked
fun.
some really good questions. You made me think.
So, people, I hope you enjoy it. See you next time.
Thank you so much.